was all planned.
I don't get that. It doesn't make any sense.
These young ladies asked us not to reveal their names, but they shared with ABC2 News what they know about Nicholas Browning. He was on the golf team and a student in the gifted and talented classes at Delaney High School.
He's only 15.
This is the story of a 15-year-old boy who killed his entire family, then calmly went back to his friend's house and acted like nothing happened. No panic, no urgency, no signs of fear. The next day, he called the police and reported that his family had been murdered. But what the investigators realized almost immediately was that this wasn't a discovery, it was a cover. And the person responsible was someone the victim trusted completely. Welcome to Too Close for Comfort, where the people closest to you are the ones you can't trust. And this case is one of the clearest examples of that reality. But sometimes, danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from inside your own home. This story takes place in Croxland, Maryland in 2008, a quiet suburban area, the kind of place where people feel safe leaving their doors unlocked, where families build routines, where nothing like this is supposed to happen. At the center of this case is Nicholas Browning. At 15 years old, Nicholas didn't stand out in a negative way. He was doing well in school, he was involved in sports, and he was also a Boy Scout. He played varsity golf and lacrosse. To anyone looking from the outside, he seemed like a normal teenager with a structured life. His father, John W. Browning, was an attorney. His mother, Tamara Browning, was a homemaker. He also had two younger brothers, Gregory Browning and Benjamin Browning. From the outside, this looked like a stable, successful family. But as we've seen again and again, appearances can be misleading. And sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones you understand the least.
On February 1st, 2008, Nicholas was spending the night at a friend's house. This detail matters because it created distance between him and what was about to happen. At some point during the night, he left, quietly, without drawing attention. There's no record of an argument right before, no sudden trigger that night, which raises an important question. Was this planned? When he arrived home, his entire family was asleep. The house was quiet, still. And at that moment, everything that happened next was a decision. He took a 9mm handgun that belonged to his father. Then, he moved through the house, room by room. This wasn't chaotic, and it wasn't rushed. It appears controlled. He killed his parents first, then his younger brothers. That's a total of 4 people, all inside their own home. All killed by someone they trusted. And that's what makes this case so disturbing. Because trust was the very thing that made this possible. And then he left. No panic, no attempt to call for help. Instead, he went back to his friend's house, and he stayed there. This is one of the most unsettling parts of the case, because after something this extreme, most people would show signs of distress. But here, there was none.
Which suggests something deeper: control, detachment, or a complete emotional disconnect from what had just happened. And this is where the case starts to shift from shocking to just deeply disturbing, because it forces you to ask, how can someone do this and then just go back to normal like that? The next day, February 2nd, he returned home. That's when Nicholas called the police. He reported to them that his family had been killed. At first, this made him seem like the one discovering the crime, but investigators quickly noticed problems with his story. The first one was there was no forced entry, no sign of an outside intruder at all, and his timeline didn't fully make sense at all. By February 3rd, 2 days later, he confessed. He admitted he had killed his entire family, just at the young age of 15 years old. Now comes the question that still divides people. Why? Nicholas, he claimed abuse. He described his father as extremely strict, said there was pressure as well as control, and that everything built up until he had reached a breaking point. From that perspective, this could be seen as a reaction, but prosecutors argued something completely different. They believed this was about control, that he didn't want rules, didn't want limitations, and most disturbingly, they claimed he killed his brothers so he wouldn't have to share his inheritance, which paints a completely different picture. No reaction, but a decision. And that's what makes this case so unsettling, because depending on what you believe, this is either a tragedy or something far more calculated. But let's go deeper into why the police thought it was Nicholas. It wasn't just the crime scene. No forced entry, nobody coming in, nobody coming out, nothing stolen. It was also his behavior. It just didn't match the situation. He wasn't reacting the way that someone typically would after discovering something just that traumatic. There was a lack of urgency, a lack of visible shock, and that stood out to police. Then came the timeline. Nicholas said he had been at a friend's house, which was true, but investigators started to ask deeper questions. When exactly did he leave? How long was he gone? And did anyone see him during that time? And slowly, the gaps started to show. The timeline just didn't fully protect Nicholas at all. And once investigators began to see inconsistencies, they applied pressure, not aggressively, but strategically. They asked the same questions in different ways. They looked for changes in the story, small details that just didn't line up. And over time, that pressure builds because it becomes harder and harder to maintain a lie when every detail is being examined. By February 3rd, just 2 days after the murders, Nicholas eventually confessed. And this is where things get important. Confessions don't usually happen randomly. They happen when pressure meets reality. And at that point, Nicholas knew investigators were closing in. The evidence was pointing inward, not outward. There was no intruder, no alternative suspect, and psychologically, that creates a breaking point because maintaining the story becomes harder than telling the truth, especially for someone his age. At 15, you're far less experienced in handling sustained pressure, and when faced with direct questioning, inconsistencies in your story, and the realization that you're not convincing anyone, The mental strain builds fast. Another factor, control. If the act itself was about control, then confessing it can also be a form of control. Choosing when to admit it and choosing how to tell the story comes out, instead of having it fully exposed on its own. And that's just something investigators often see. Confessions become the final step once the person realizes they have lost control of the situation.
After his confession, Nicholas Browning was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. This wasn't a case that went to a long trial. In January of 2009, he pleaded guilty, and with that plea came the sentence. 4 life sentences, 2 of them to be served consecutively, which means even though he was only 15 when the crime happened, the justice system treated this as something that could never be undone, because it couldn't. 4 lives were taken inside their own home. A father, John Browning, a mother, Tamara Browning, and 2 children, Gregory and Benjamin Browning, all gone in one night. Today, Nicholas Browning is being held at Jessup Correctional Institution, and technically, he does have a possibility of parole. He could become eligible around 2031, but eligibility does not mean release. In fact, he has already tried to have his sentence reduced, and that request was denied, which tells you something important. Even years later, the weight of what he did has not changed. The court looked at the case again and decided the sentence stands. And that's something you see in cases like this, where the crime itself is so severe that even time doesn't lessen its impact. And this is where the case becomes more than just a story, because it forces you to think about something uncomfortable: trust. We're taught that family is supposed to be safe, that your home is where you're protected, that the people closest to you are the ones you can rely on. But cases like this challenge that idea completely, because in this situation, the danger wasn't outside. It wasn't a stranger. It was already inside the house, sitting at the table, living under the same roof. And that's what makes it so difficult to process, because there were no alarms, no warnings loud enough to stop what was coming. 4 people trusted him. They went to sleep that night believing they were safe, and they never woke up. And that's the part that stays with you. Not just what happened, but how close it was. How normal everything looked right before it all ended. Because this is what too close for comfort is about. The stories that don't just shock you, but make you think. The ones that remind you that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you can't trust. What do you think? Do you believe his claims of abuse? Or do you think this was something else entirely? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, please subscribe, like, share, because there are more cases that are just so unsettling and so nerve-wracking, you will come back.
Why are you telling us this big story about going the keys when the keys are in the pocket of your jacket?
What?
The car keys.
Yes.
You had them the whole time?
Mm-hmm. I don't realize that no more. That's my friends didn't tell you that.
Again, an untruth. Why did you do this? You keep saying that.
Who did it?
How
Who would do it? What kind of person would do this?
I don't know.
What part of what we're saying don't you understand? Is there
I
anything?
don't see how one set of keys to.
Why are they under your bed?
My parents, if they want me to, to get, if this is a burglar, to get
Come
the
on.
keys.
That's cool.
Come on. You're gonna have to do better than that.
So what's the threat here? If you take this to trial, I'm going to go to jail based on.
No, that's not just a set of keys. There's a lot more than that.
What?
I'm not gonna sit here and tell
We
you
don't
everything.
do that.
I think I didn't do it. There's can't be other evidence.
You did do it.
I didn't do it.
Nobody else did this.
How can you be so certain?
Because I've been a cop for 22 years and my intuition's pretty good. I've been to plenty of homicide scenes.